Good morning, folks, and happy Labor Day. So today we're going to celebrate three groups of people. First of all, there's the American worker. That's number one. The people that get up, go to work every single day. They may hate it, but they do it. Number two, the labor movement. The people in unions, the people who run unions, the people who have organized to put unions together, because that's what got you the weekend, better wages, and safer working conditions. But there's a group that we are not going to leave out, and that's the immigrant worker. And we're not going to leave those people out because those people were just as instrumental, if not more, in building America. So I have three examples. And one, we're going to start with New York, because during his Manhattan trial, where he was found guilty of defrauding the state of New York, Donald Trump's son, one of his sons, I believe it might have been Eric, got so incensed that he could not believe the Trump family was being treated this way because they built the New York skyline. That's a flat out lie. The New York skyline was built by immigrant architects, some trained and some not. So some of the architects who came over here from Scotland and England were highly trained, and they got the more plum jobs, okay, like the Trinity Church. So they got some shine and some recognition. But then there's a whole host of people who were less trained. They were poor. They weren't trained in architecture, but they could build. And they could build to the required standards of the day. And these are the people who put up the houses that they ended up living in, the tenements, the row houses, all throughout New York. Apartments that are still in use today, although they've been renovated and improved. These are the people who built the New York skyline. It certainly was not the Trump family, and it certainly was not the Trump organization. In fact, there are people I know in New York who believe that Donald Trump's building is certainly the ugliest building in the city. So that's the first group I want to talk about. The second group I want to talk about is the immigrant workers who built the Transcontinental Railway, which was a monumental achievement. It connected the East with the West. It made goods and services easier to move and improved everyday life. The Transcontinental Railway was built largely on the backs of Chinese immigrants and some Irish immigrants. And the guys who were building this railroad, the companies that were building this railroad, certainly did try to get American workers to take the jobs. And even when they could get American workers to take the jobs, they couldn't get them to stay. And that's because it was one of the most treacherous jobs in America. There were no unions. There was no protection for these people. You could fall off the side of a mountain doing this. And a lot of people died doing this. But the Chinese and the Irish immigrants largely built the Transcontinental Railway. Okay, that's number two. Now we go out to Butte, Montana, where we have the Copper Kings, all white men who came out there looking for fortunes and got their fortunes. They became some of the richest men in the world at that time. These are the people who took Butte, Montana from a mining camp into a metropolis. But the people who worked in their mines were Irish immigrants who got left out of the story. And they not only get left out of the story, but they got left out of what they achieved. These are the people who lived in a place called the Cabbage Patch. Now, some people say they called it the Cabbage Patch because, cabbage was dirt cheap, and that's what they ate most of the time, and that is true. But other people say that somehow the name of the shanty town, which is exactly what it is, got that name because of the smell of sulfur in the air. And that's also a possibility. But be that as it may, these buildings were made out of tar paper. Some of them were wood. All of them had dirt floors. None of them had heat. None of them had electricity, and none of them had running water. This was the way these people lived. Disease was rampant. They had raw sewage running right through their town. And the few white people who lived in there with them, they were criminals, actually, who basically ruled that town with an iron fist and kept the immigrants in line. A lot of the immigrants who lived there were women whose husbands died in the mines. The mines were treacherous as treacherous as the railway. No masks, no protection. You know, men would die from lung disease. And these are the people who built America. They made the Copper Kings rich. When the Copper Kings turned Butte into a metropolis, it was on the backs of these people. And I'm tired of hearing Donald Trump, his cultists, and the right wing disparage immigrant workers. I really am. It's unconscionable. You know, I work at a hardware store, and I have a lot of contractors who come in. And I got one contractor I talk to a lot. And when he told me he hires undocumented workers, I decided to just ask why. I wanted to hear what his rationale was, because I'm always looking for trouble. And he told me because they're cheaper and they work harder. He goes, and they care about the work that they're doing. So I said, what about language barrier? He goes, that's why we have Google Translate. I don't know what else to tell you, folks, but I do want you to think of one thing before I close out this video. If Donald Trump is elected and he deports 11 million migrants, after, of course, he rounds them up and sticks them in camps. But after he deports those people, if you're worried about your food prices right now, you should really worry about your food prices after that happens. Because I can promise you that American workers will not be lining up to pick your crops in the fields. The immigrant worker helped in large part to make this country what it is, to give this country and the people in it the opportunity to live this way. This country was built on the backs of immigrant workers, no matter what the GOP tells you. You guys have a great Labor Day. I will talk to you all later.